So I mentioned in the last video that we're going to build a so-called RESTful API with Node.js. Now, we haven't even had a look at Node.js yet, but this is important to understand because this is what we'll build in this course. What is a RESTful API? REST stands for Representational State Transfer. And what is it? Well, a RESTful API is, in the end, a server-side solution, a server-side service, so a server-side app, you could say. So we have the server and we have the client, the browser. Now, in our case, Angular. The Angular app is going to run on the client. And this Angular app is going to send these background requests I was talking about. The server has to send back responses, which we can then use in the Angular app. Now, often these responses are HTML pages, but that's only the case for traditional web apps where we don't have the support for background requests, but where we send back a new HTML page for every request. But this is not what we use in an Angular app. Instead, in an Angular app, a single page app, and not such a traditional web app, there we have our client, but we could also, and that's important, we could also have other clients, a mobile app, for example. And this mobile app could store and fetch data, but doesn't need or use render HTML. We could also have some other client, some service script we run on our machine, which also wants to access certain features which we expose on this API. But in our case, in this course, we simply have a client, which is a browser with a single page application, and there we want to store and fetch data, but never render a second HTML page, because everything is re-rendered with JavaScript in that one page we have in that single page. So we get the right case here. I'm just showing these other cases because the important thing to understand is that a RESTful API is a stateless backend. It doesn't care about which client connected to it. All a RESTful API does is it exposes a couple of different URLs, so-called paths, to which you can send requests. And depending to which path you send a request, something different will happen. So to show this, we got a client, our Angular app, we got our RESTful server, and then we got different paths, /users, /posts, /products. So you could send a request to your domain /users, you could send a request to yourdomain.com/posts, you could send a request to yourdomain.com products. And depending on to which path you send the request, something different will happen and you will get a different response. But this, of course, makes your API fully transparent and predictable, and you can do different things with it. We create the API on our own, so we got full control what we want to support, what we want to offer. Now, besides these different paths, there's one other important thing we need for identifying or for handling a request correctly, and that is the HTTP verb used for that request. Get, post, delete, patch, put, these would be verbs you can use. And for the different paths, you might be supporting different verbs. You don't have to support all verbs for every path. For some paths, you only want to allow get requests. For some paths, you maybe only want to allow post requests. And with this, you can send such an AJAX request through Angular's HTTP client. For example, send a post request to yourdomain.com/users. And this would probably be adding a new user to your backend database. But what exactly happens is, of course, controlled with your server-side code that runs for this path. And in this module, you will learn how to create these paths and how to send requests to them. In the end, you will get back a response, which you can then use in your client-side application. That is how a RESTful API works. Now, we also need to care about the data we send. And there it's important to understand that we communicate with JSON data, not with HTML data, not with XML data. JSON is a data format which looks very much like JavaScript objects, which is very small but yet understandable and machine readable, and which allows us to exchange data. We could use different data like XML, URL encoded data, where we have everything added as query parameters in the URL, form data. These would all be alternatives, but in most of the cases, and also in this course, we will use JSON data. So enough of the theory then. Let's start building that Node backend so that we can also see how that all works.